Wednesday. Eat well, think well, move well, sleep well. Wellness Wednesday.
Hey, everybody. This is the Health is Love podcast. We are on our Wellness Wednesday theme, and I am your host, Dr. Anissa Shomo, and I have a special guest here, Dr. Toni. So, Dr. Toni, thank you so much for being here. So, you were actually one of our first guests, and we actually did, I think, on Facebook Live back then. So, this is a little bit of a different format. But it's still all very relevant. So, when we initially talked, so let me just tell everybody a little bit about who you are first before I kind of get into our conversation. So to let everybody know, so you own your own business, drtoni.com. You can check out a lot of things that are happening there. But I will tell people you have your martyr mindset coaching, and you have SOAR to excellence coaching. So you do a lot of coaching of people who are kind of in transition. A lot of times people don't really know what health coaches do, but they can be really helpful for if you're having any kind of transition. Like if you're like, oh, I need to get a new job. What about this job I don't need? So they kind of help you like focus on like you have some kind of thing in your life that feels a little unsettled and you're trying to figure out what's the next move. But in order for you to figure out the next move, you have to figure out what could possibly settle you. Yeah. So I have worked with you in the past when I had a little bit of that going on, trying to figure out what's going to be my next career move. But, definitely you can help people with family boundaries, all types of stuff. So I know that like mindset coaches do all types of stuff. So that is why we wanted you to come on today to just talk some about mindset coaching, because this is going to be part of our Think Well hashtag. So we have different hashtags. So we have Eat Well, Sleep Well, Think Well, and Move Well. So this is going to be part of the Think Well series. And what else can I say about you? So you're board certified in family medicine, just like me, and do a lot of different work. I know you do a lot working with corporate clients, trying to help different teams come together as well, because sometimes teams need to formulate a group mindset that can be helpful and productive. And I love your social media, just always being very positive. So everybody should definitely follow you because you are always dropping gems. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Of course, I love watching you and what you do. It touches the people who are in training. It touches the patient. It touches the community. And it's a holistic way to kind of show up in the world. And that's one of the things I really believe in. So it kind of goes with our theme today. And Dr. Toni, DrToniMD.com. Because by name, sometimes people don't spell my name correctly. I just want to make sure.
Okay, sorry.
DrToniMD.com and on IG as well, if people want to follow me there. So it's good to have these conversations with people who have been through some ups and downs, right?
Right. And that's what's interesting about life is that it's so up. So I recently came back from celebrating 10 years of marriage with my husband and actually 20 years of being together. We started dating when we were like 19 and we're 39 now. And definitely in the past 20 years, been a lot of ups and downs. And what's interesting about that is that everybody goes through ups and downs, but I just feel like a lot of people can have a lot of shame around their downs and are not always the most honest about some of those, those valleys of life. A lot of times, especially with social media, we share a lot of the peaks of the mountain peaks. But in those valleys, we don't always talk about everything. And for me personally, like I've had a lot of things going on in my life that are really not my story. So I don't always share that kind of stuff. But the things that I'm personally going through, like, when I was going through cervical cancer, that was kind of when I started kind of making a shift in my life more toward sharing that piece of my life, because I find that in those moments, in those valleys, there's a lot of opportunity to connect with people and share a lot more intimacy and more depth in our conversations and just in our human connection. And so for me, I've just kind of experimented and leaning into that. And that's kind of like how my whole business has grown, So I know you do that a lot in your business, just sharing, about all of the valleys in your life.
I mainly, if I were to pick one word that describes my brand, it's, or one phrase that describes my brand, it's, how to turn failure into fabulous,
Yeah, for sure.
basically. I've been driven to where I probably belong after a whole lot of loss or a whole lot of redirection, or,
Right.
sometimes I actually posted, just yesterday about my baby. I have a little 11-month-old and she's a little determined person.
Aw, and she's so adorable.
But she is so focused on what she's focused on. And I'm like, well, if you turn around, there's an answer behind you. But she's like, let me finish what I'm doing, And so we get that in life. So many times we get focused on maybe not so much the right thing or the right timing. And we're really frustrated, but having conversations with people who have actually gotten themselves out of it is super helpful. I don't want to be this guru on the top of the mountain saying, this is what you should do. And this is why you should do, I've lived it. I don't want you to suffer. I can help.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. And it's interesting, what I like about being a family doctor is I get to work with a bunch of family doctors. And so family doctors are kind of very interesting people. I feel like we are people who really like intimacy. And so like a lot of our relationships can be very intimate. Like I'm in the office with 4 women and we have like our little like woman tribe office, and so we talk about all types of stuff. And one of my colleagues said something that I had never really heard. And so she said she had been learning more about ADHD because people in her family have problems with it. So she was reading a book that I need to ask her what the name of it is. But she said that there's sometimes with people with ADHD can have a hard time accepting criticism or like feedback. That's what I tell a lot of my patients. A lot of times people may perceive things as criticism, but it's actually really feedback, and it can be an opportunity for you to grow. But a lot of times people may not be able to receive it in that way. And so like I have my niece who I've helped raise her whole life, and she was making a lot of, bumping her head a lot. She's like 20 something. She was bumping her head a lot, and she felt like I was being critical of her. And I had to tell her, I said, I don't want to see you fail in life. Like I'm trying to tell you things that I think could help you in this period of your life. Whether you listen or not, it's fine, but I'm not your enemy, And it's just hard because I think that sometimes, number one, people can be their own worst enemy, their own worst critique. And so sometimes when they have those voices in their head that are always being negative, sometimes if you say something negative, it can reinforce that thinking, and they don't really see like you're coming from a place of experience. And that's kind of what I was telling her. I said, I've been there and done all the things that you've done. So I'm just trying to tell you like how to avoid some of those pitfalls. And so how do you kind of work with your clients about, trying to overcome that and being able to accept feedback?
Well, you said many, many things there. And because I work with people who perfectionism is touted, I mean, like if you work with someone who's a CEO of a company, a founder of a company, a physician, you don't want those people making mistakes. So yeah, sure. They are up against the wall a lot. And so it's what has made them successful, but it usually is part of their stressor internally. So they have a lot of what we call ants, automatic negative thoughts, and they beat themselves up a lot. And no one else even realizes it because everybody else is telling you how great you are most of the time. And if it sounds a lot like what you say to yourself in private time, you're like, well, wait a minute. It's like a trigger. And so I think it's really important that we do know what our triggers are and come to trusted people who love us like our aunt and say, you're a successful person. I've been struggling with something. And now you just touched a nerve. Why don't we talk about it? But people don't often do that, but we should be in a safe space before we do it. But it's good to know that you have that voice, and the voice is loud and wrong, and to figure out how sometimes we have to label the behavior. There's a PhD doctor, Susan David, and she talks about emotional agility, right? And it's part of our Harvard School of Coaches. And, she gives us talks and things of that nature. And she gave us one during COVID. And she said, being able to name the behavior and realize that that is not who you are. But if you fail the test, you're not a failure. If you're frustrated or angry, that doesn't mean that's your whole personality and who you are and labels. So it's good to step away from that feeling or that behavior and not think someone's talking about you as an individual and judging you and so forth. We're just trying to figure out how we can help,
Right. And I think that I don't know, it's hard because I feel like sometimes people can be very avoidant of that. Like, they may feel like, they're trying to go through life, they're bumping their head. And instead of going to ask you for advice and getting that mentorship, they can be a little avoid. I've had this happen with my students. Like, I had a crazy story happen to me a couple summers ago. And one of my students came with me with some really big news, like life-changing news. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this before you decided to make a decision to change your life? And so we actually were able to kind of like backtrack, because I was like, I just don't want you to regret this later, so but it's hard because they like, I mentor a bunch of students, and they will often say like, I didn't want to disappoint you. And I'm just you're not disappointing me. It's just really like data points. Like, where are you right now? How can we help you? How can we get you to wherever you need to be? But it's just hard, because that's what our brain does. Our brain will tell us, like, I cuss, right? I don't cuss a lot on here, but I say one of the things you have to learn in life is that sometimes your brain tells you a lot of BS. I'm not gonna cuss right now. Your brain tells you a lot of BS.
Right.
And sometimes you have to learn how to stop listening to the BS that your brain tells you and really figure out what's the reality of the situation.
Listen, I have clients come to me from all walks of life, and what I've discovered is how much trauma all my clients have experienced, and their stories are different, but the trauma is like a river that runs underneath the behavior. It runs underneath the shame feelings. It runs underneath your desire to get it right and not have to end up back in the hood, or end up back in a bad, upbringing or whatever. So there's a lot of trauma that never gets, as you said, spoken about. It's a whisper, it's in the background, and you think you're over it, but I've discovered they're not. And so we have to kind of walk backwards a little bit. I'm not a therapist, but I do send lots of clients to therapy, but it's helpful if we can kind of name it and say what it is that we want to work on. And if we won't ever speak about it, it's very difficult to do. So knowing that you're coming in with this underground running current of trauma, you work in a hostile America of corporate or whatever, and figuring out why you do what you do can help.
Right.
So some people are just like, I feel this way and that's that. And I'm like, well, let's talk a little bit about why you think you have to work your ass to death. Like, why do you think you have to be on this treadmill all the time? Because people come to me and they're just worn out, exhausted. Oh, I slept all weekend, I still feel like crap, and so on. I'm like, right, that means you're not happy with what is going on in your life, and you're too exhausted to figure it out half the time. You need help.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the biggest thing. That was the whole thing. Like, people in America, you're supposed to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Like, that's what our theme of our culture is, right? So it's just hard, because that kind of culture makes it hard for people to ask for help. And so people are literally like, and, part of our culture of corporate, and capitalism is just like people are like, corporations are trying to turn people into robots, and people are trying to be robots, and they don't know, like, they're like, why am I so tired? It's just like, because you're not a robot.
It's not. I did a video on my social media. I did a video about this. Internalized capitalism is a thing, and I try to talk to people about what it shows, how it shows up in your life, right? So one way is that you feel like your worth is tied to productivity. It's very common for people to know they should be taking a break or know they should be on vacation and still work anyway, okay? So they've been doing it so long, it's just, they say it's like being a fish in water, and water is your environment, it's what you're used to, and so you don't think twice about it. Another sign is that you don't value rest. You think you're being lazy. Have you ever heard yourself saying like, oh, you could be doing something right now? Don't waste time, right? Don't rest. Don't sit down somewhere. Right. It's not good. You also sometimes will say, well, this activity is more than that activity as far as your time and how you divide your time.
Right.
There's a hierarchy, and so there's like a lot of things that will make you realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing that thing again. But if you just don't realize it, you end up staying on that hamster treadmill running for your life. You're just always on the hamster wheel the rest of your life. But that's why we need to know where it comes from. Oh, wait a minute. This is how my grandparents always taught me to be.
Right. No, and I do a lot of work with that, with my book and with my brand. Like, that's really the whole purpose of my brand, because as a family doctor, I know that I can't treat your body until we address your mind first, So I do a lot of mind and body work, trauma-informed care. For sure. And that's why I do it. Like, because people will be like, "Who? How did you become this way?" And it's just like, I just, number one, I have to learn it for myself. Like, I definitely did have to think about, why I was the way that I am, because I grew up, my parents had their own business. So I saw my parents work like 20 hours a day.
Right.
And you get to the point where you just get a little older. Like, I got to about 30 years old and I was like, I am tired. What? I don't know how my parents did that. But honestly,
Yes.
of course, one of my traumatic things is seeing how that broke up our family. Like, my parents got to the point where they had a 6-figure business in the 90s, like 6-figure Black owned bakery in the 90s. They could have had a TV show these days, like they were that successful, but it destroyed our whole family. And so for me, I probably have a lot more awareness of it than other people, because I see what can come of that. And so I've always tried to figure out, like, well, I don't want to work so much to the point of either poor health, because my parents' health is not the best, or to the point of losing everything. Like, they literally had everything and lost everything. And that's probably one of the biggest traumas in my life, is like, just, and even my husband, we talked about, like, one of his traumas in his life is just, he had to move so much. He never owned anything. His family never owned anything. Like, when we bought our house, I actually lost my job, like right before, like the year we bought our house. A year later, like within a year of buying our house, I lost my job. And I can't say I lost my job, because I work in academia. A big portion, I had just quit a job to work another job, and then that job like disappeared into thin air, because I work for the government basically. And so a government contract kind of thing, it was just gone. And so he was just like, "Oh my God, I don't want to be homeless. I don't want to leave our house." And I said, "I don't think you know me very well. I am a saver."
Don't you worry, baby. Be fine.
So people respond to it in different ways. And the way that I've always responded to it is, I save a lot of money, because I know that life is chaotic. There can be things that happen, like you lose your job, and and you don't have any money. So like, I was able to float us for a couple months until I got another part of my job. And I wasn't worried about it at all. Like, we were on our way to Europe the next day. And he was like, "Should we go to Europe?" And I was like, "Absolutely. We're going." But he was so stressed. And so I was telling somebody about this story recently, because I'm like, he was in residency still. So it was like, he was just graduating residency. So he didn't have any money. So that's part of why he was stressed.
Of course.
And so
scarcity mindset follows residency most of the time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So we go to Europe. We mostly have a good time, but toward the end, it was kind of like getting back to reality. He's just like, "Oh, we're broke." And I was just like, no, we're not broke. It's fine. And I was telling people recently, because he's trying to figure out what to do in his life right now. And I was like, "I know you can't be a sugar baby, because we went on a sugar baby trip and you were stressed." Talking about money.
Right. He's not going to be comfortable in that situation. But truth be told, I really wish more people would learn to redefine success. And so being a saver is success in a lot of homes, because people will live not necessarily check to check, but they're also not savers and planners and people with a budget. And so I work with people who have substantial incomes, and I've asked, shockingly, several about their budget, and they're like, "Budget?" Don't think just because you earn outside of the usual median income in the United States that means you shouldn't have. Everybody should have. I was a banker before. I worked in corporate banking. I worked in finance. I worked in insurance companies before I was a physician. I can't even imagine not having like a spreadsheet or, but right. Some kind of budget, some kind of clue about the buckets of money that keep your life moving in the right direction.
Right. For sure. And that's part of the pitfall that people make when they do become like high earners. Is that, when you're talking about internalized capitalism, they're like, "Oh, I have to work more so I can have more money so I can buy more things." And that's one of the biggest things that we've always tried to be, or at least I've tried to always be intentional about it. Because like I said, I saw my parents have everything and lose everything. Right. And so I tried to, more than anything, learn from those mistakes. And so like our house, we can afford it with one income. We have old cars. We don't have brand new cars. My car is 10 years old. I bought it brand new, but then I paid it off 5 years ago. Right. So for the past 5 years, I've not had a car payment. So there's just like all types of things that people can do if they start to kind of dial it. Because it's like, it's like a cycle, right? If you're constantly buying new things, like that internalized capitalism, then you constantly have to work more, that sort of thing. But it's just like you have a choice. Like you don't have
You
to buy
don't
new
have to
things.
do any of that. I mean, knowing what an asset is and what's the liability is a big deal. And, not to be all, technical, but most of these things depreciate the minute you buy them, and you try to find out which ones they are. It ain't the purse and the car, I promise you, that are going to be, the biggest assets you have later on, unless it's some classic, and they don't want miles on that thing. So,
Right.
it's not the daily use things that you have or like so much use most of the time. It just yesterday, Louis Vuitton was blowing up all over the internet because they have $1 million bag, and people were fussing, and I'm like, well, they're not talking to you.
I mean, they're not talking to me either. Like, it's
That's
just
not for me.
exactly. So it's hard because, people, there was somebody who posted today about like things I wish I would have known when I was 40. And one of the things was saying that, they wish they would have known to value experiences more than things. And that's because that's the whole thing. Like I have so many clothes, so many pairs of shoes, so many bags, like all types of stuff that, you wear once, you give it away, all that kind of stuff. So it's just, trying to, for me though, because of that, I don't spend a lot of money on that stuff. Like, because I know I'm going to wear it a couple times and then sizes change, like all types of stuff happens in the meantime, right?
Ooh, let's not talk about that. I mean,
so it's, for me, it's just like, I would, but we do make money and you do spend it. So I'm like, so I would rather spend it on, our anniversary celebration. My dad, when he turned 70, I threw a party for him, because I would rather spend it on places where I could create memories. Like I literally went shopping in New York right before paying for my dad's 70th party. And it was a similar amount of money for his party versus like some kind of expensive shoes. And I was like, I would rather spend the money on a night that, that I don't have anything to put in my closet for it. Because I'm like, if I spend that amount of money on shoes, I'm never going to wear them anyway. Because I'm going to be like, why did I buy these shoes? I'm never going to wear them because where am I going to wear them to?
Trust me, I'm telling you. Because I work with people who now earn, it's interesting how they're carrying old mindsets into their new life. And we have to sit down and say, okay, hold on. Why did you work so hard in the first place? I really wish more people would ask themselves, wait a minute, what matters now? Because you've achieved all the early things. Right. And if you don't get some more fulfillment in there, you're going to probably feel regret. And I worked in geriatrics, and so have you. And there's nothing worse than being in that older age, having regret. So, let's focus and get a little more disciplined versus the pain of regret. So there's a pain of discipline. There's a pain of regret. We have to make a choice and decide what we're sacrificing for. For you and I, it's mostly experience. We want to just have fun. We want to see the world and make it all worth it. But not everybody sits down and says, well, why am I doing this?
Right. And it's hard because, especially now, the thing for me about experiences is you get to spend time with people, right? Like my husband and I, we've been together 20 years, but we've been working a lot of that, right? So it's like, how much time do we spend together during a year? And so when you go on vacation, it's a time when we really can focus on each other more than anything. So that's the thing. It's like, yeah, it costs money, but that time is valuable about the conversations we have, the experiences we have together. We try new food. We get to do all types of stuff that we generally don't have time to do when we're home,
It's an investment. So, people have to start making a shift from things that cost and things that are worth investing in. And you can't buy more time. And technically you can't buy more quality time and quality health. And, these are things you have to. So I know you spend a lot of time training, for example, and me, I'm a Peloton fanatic. So like 8,000 miles on the thing. Right. And so that's a lot of hours. It's a lot of time, but I really value being able to walk around all those places you pay to go to and enjoy the view. And, I went to Hawaii for a conference several years ago with a girlfriend, and she's sports medicine. She's all fit and fabulous, running around. She runs, she's this, she that. We were on a tour with these people and they couldn't even get off the tour bus to go to the waterfall. It was supposed to be just like a quick, 30-minute hike, not even a hike. Okay. They were like, oh, we don't have our lift and our wheelchair. They paid all this money to come to Hawaii and couldn't see a thing. It was muddy. It had rained. So they had the money, they had the ability,
Right.
except
Yeah.
physically. So we got to start thinking, okay, what will I regret if I don't
Right.
make a plan? And if you don't have health and if you don't have the people you love
Right.
beside you, it's just not the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
More intentional, be more intentional.
Exactly. And I've been intentional about even the places I want to go when I'm young. So when I went to Hawaii, it is very like you have to hike a lot in Hawaii. So I
Yeah.
was just like, that's a place that I probably wouldn't go as an older adult. I mean, maybe if I was going to hang out on the beach, but
Yeah.
I'm happy that we started going in our 30s because it's definitely a place where you want to have some level of function and be able to like hike and see stuff because I have seen people, Hawaii, who are older trying to hike up and down because you're hiking up and down volcanoes. Like most of the time, if you're doing anything outside of the beach, which I'm not really a beach person, so that means I gotta go and do excursions and do different stuff. And so like now, like I said, this version of myself, maybe when I get older it'll be different, but no, it's of course they're happy that they're there, but it's just one of those things like you can't wait until you retire to do that kind of stuff. Like you got to go now.
No, there's a lot of things that one thing that I would have regretted that forced me to think twice. I wish more women would be honest about what they want, right? So living for the people, a lot of times we're living for the rules that were set for us long ago.
Right.
You're going to get straight A's, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to college, blah, blah, blah. Now you've done all these things and you're like needing to sit down and think, well, what would make me happy? And for me, it was, motherhood. And I probably spent somebody's retirement plan trying to have a baby. I'm for real. I mean, the numbers,
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity though,
That's it. It's like, which one do you want? Do you want the experience of at least having an opportunity to do this? And as an only child with a small family, the biggest thing for me was, did I want my family to just fizzle out? Didn't feel good to keep building something and have no one to leave it to or even think about that sort of thing. So other people would never spend, if you will, but I felt like it was an investment in the legacy that I wanted to leave. Legacy level thinking is how you make some very difficult decisions when you're really stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like 30 years from now, I'm going to think it was a great idea. Even if right now I'm like, dang. I mean, I literally spent the kids' college fund trying to bring her here, but oh well.
But you can get it back. That's the whole thing. And that's what I really
Exactly.
learned from my parents. Like I saw my parents get everything, lose everything. But I really saw the way my father thought about it, which my father was just like, well, I've learned a lot. I'll try to get it back. So that's what he's really done. My dad actually does own a bakery right now. He's actually like working on it. You know what I mean? So, but my mom, she was just devastated. She was just like, it's over. Everything's done. And it's just like, it's just trying to like have that mind shift of sometimes you do fail or sometimes different things happen in your life that are out of your control. And you try to figure out like, what lessons did you learn from that failure or whatever happened? Event, we'll call it. Because for me, that's just the whole thing. I'm like, we can't control everything. Like even when my job fizzled out of nowhere, like I had learned a lot from that job though, and I was just like, well, I got to move on to a new job and try to figure out what to do with myself. But so it's kind of an interesting thing because I feel like a lot of people try to control everything, versus like you should have some idea of where you're going, and what you want out of life. Right. But you have to also understand that like it's never going to be perfect, right?
I wish more people, I recently did a free training for people who just kept coming to me with this list of complaints that started to sound like the same. Mm-hmm. They're very resourceful people. They're very intelligent people. A lot of them are smarter than me, really. And they were just kind of at their wits' end. And one of the things that they were doing was people pleasing, which at this stage of your life may not be so great, right? You're not getting what you want out of it. Right. And number two, they weren't making decisions they were at peace with. So they were always, their sleep was messed up, their health was messed up, their weight gain was there, the anxiety and stress was there. I mean, it was like self-inflicted, but they didn't see it necessarily that way. Right. And so if more people would decide, here's what I really love, here's where I feel at peace, and build from that. I mean, that's a start. You don't have to always think about money first.
Right. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I feel like a lot of people have a hard time getting to peace because they want things to be perfect and they're very unrealistic. You know what I mean? It's just like, there's two different things. Like, I don't want people to settle for things,
Right.
but I want people to live in reality. You know, like the fairy princess world.
Yeah, I was never a Disney kid. My parents were like, turn that crap on. You know? Like, we're going to work for what we get. And there's no frog kissing here, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Anything worth having typically is going to require some effort. And it's a question of, well, what do you want to work towards? You're a runner and I'm certainly not. I did try. It's not my thing, you know?
No, and that's the thing. I don't like biking. So everybody has their thing. Like, I thought I was going to do a triathlon. I was like, oh, I'm going to do a triathlon. Then I found out that I hated biking.
For real, honestly, I tried several things and that was the one I settled on because I didn't get hurt.
Exactly. Yeah,
everybody's different, but the result is I get to meet wonderful people who are into the things I'm into and travel the world with them and do fun things. And so settling, like you said, is just not an option. But I feel like so many people don't know that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They make a decision long ago and then they stick with it even when it doesn't feel good. It's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And they come to me with the same list of symptoms. So I said, okay, we're going to put this training together because I don't mind helping, but I feel like sometimes people need to get a journal. They need, like your journal, right? It prompts you along to write things down. I'm like, you guys need to start thinking a little bit more about what you don't like, what you don't want, what peace looks like for you. And maybe you changed your mind. It's okay. You don't have to want the same things you used to. I can do lots of things. Same as you, right? You have a lot of skills. You don't have to stick with that old job or that old decision. It's very important that you start working towards a new plan, one that fits you now, today.
Exactly. Because that's one of the biggest things that I've said about even our relationship. Like, we've been together for 20 years, and I say that we're not the same people as we were 20 years ago. I said, and the reason we're still together is because we're still compatible. The new people who we are, the new versions of ourselves are still compatible with we met when we were 19. We didn't know who we were or what we were doing with ourselves. And now that we're a little more sure of ourselves, we found out that we actually have a lot of common still,
Thank goodness. I'm divorced and remarried, so it doesn't always work.
Well, and that's the thing is, some people, it's just, marriages are interesting. But the biggest thing about a lot of marriages is that you're not the same person 10 years later, And so, like, all of the stuff that we did when we first met, like, we used to literally just hang out and, like, go to the movies, go dancing, all this sort of thing. Like, we rarely ever do any of that stuff now,
You evolve. Y'all do run and do, like, out, you both like outings, to a certain extent, right?
And that's what's kind of interesting because, like, you learn, I talked about some of the negative things in my childhood, but some of the positive things in our childhood is we both grew up pretty similar. Like when I was young, I never played, I didn't play organized sports well. I played basketball in 8th grade, which most people don't know I ever played basketball because I wasn't good at it. And so it was short-lived in my basketball career, but I loved basketball growing up. So, but I love, it's funny now because I'm like, I wish I would have went to therapy when I was like in middle school because that was when my parents got divorced.
Yeah.
I was like, what I actually really loved about basketball was running. So I'm like, I should have ran track. I was actually really good at running. Like, they would make us in basketball practice, they would make you do suicides.
I know, my cousin was a basketball player.
And I never cared. I was the person who was just like, okay, let's do some suicides. And, so that should have been a light bulb.
Right.
Could have been like, maybe you should run track. But, back then it wasn't like, it was pretty rough when I got cut from the basketball team. That was the only reason why I went to school. So I think that, like, it's kind of like full circle. Like my husband, he grew up playing sports his whole life. And even though when he met me, like, I didn't play any sports, but we both have kind of like, I'll kind of come more into his world with being more athletic. And he's always been there. And actually, I motivate him a lot of the time because he's very inconsistent. He goes up and down because he has a lot of interests. So I'm always the person who kind of grounds him back to like he didn't want to run the last marathon. He had run a marathon the year before. But I was like, hey, I need you to run this marathon with me.
Your husband is amazing. I've seen him build stuff that I didn't even know people could like build it on their own. Like,
But I'm saying like that's the whole thing. Like when we first met, we didn't do any of that stuff. And I can see like the person who I was back then, I used to be really nitpicky and that sort of thing. Like, well, how come you never want to go out and why do you want to stay home all the time and such and such? And so it's just like, you learn how to just like let life happen, let people be who they are, let yourself be who you are, and stop trying to force things so much.
If everybody within the sound of our voices decided to advocate for themselves, the real self that they have today, I think a lot of people will be happier on earth.
Right.
I think you guys do a good job of sharing your interests and then having your separate things you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so you plan around that. Here's what we're doing together. Here's what we're doing separately. And here's, when I'll see you again.
Right.
But right now I'm going to go over here and, do my work and so forth. And you're very busy academic professional, folks. So
yeah,
if more women would just have a compartment where they protect their creativity or protect their joy or protect their hey, I need to rest. I'll see y'all next time.
Mm-hmm.
If they could just advocate for that, I think more people would have more capacity to get where they're going,
Right. Because that's what my newest course is about, coping skills. Because that's the thing when I talk about coping skills, I often ask people like, what kind of things did you like to do when you were a kid?
Period.
Because when we go through like puberty and a lot of that stuff and like a lot of that people pleasing kind of happens like middle school, high school times, you kind of lose yourself, right? And so, like I said, for us, we've kind of gotten back to a lot of those things we enjoyed as kids. And that's what's kind of interesting to me, as you see a lot of people, they get to these different ages where they're trying to rediscover themselves. And I tell people to really experiment with some of the things you liked as a kid. We both just talked about how we experimented, with different, I grew up loving water. Like I'm from Cleveland and there's no air conditioning in Cleveland. Most people don't have it. So
I know, I have family there.
Right. So in the summer, you spend like all summer, like in the pool. But I used to have like too much anxiety to swim, to like swim laps. So I used to I grew up just hanging out in the pool, but I never swam laps. So I wanted to learn how to swim laps. And so, you just try to challenge yourself and try new things. And I ended up loving it. I love swimming laps. It's so relaxing. So I think the biggest thing about a lot of people is like, they don't experiment enough. They don't experiment enough and they don't reconnect with themselves enough. And they don't create enough space to even
I know.
Think,
People come to me, somebody did a consult the other day and she was saying, I don't know if the COVID I had or whatever causes brain fog. I said, the description you're giving me right now is someone who's just at their limit. You're just over it. You're doing too much for everybody but you. And that does have a cost,
Right.
Don't go self-diagnosing and thinking the world's ending and all this stuff, don't start Googling. Start making some room to breathe, to think straight, to write down your ideas and thoughts, make that list of things that you used to love to do that maybe you got away from. I had a client, I didn't know she was like into volleyball and tennis and all. I said, you before? I've known you for years, she's like, yeah, I kind of didn't think much of it, but she had gained a lot of weight. And I guess when she gained the weight, she no longer thought that was for her. I'm like, okay, well, you lost 100 pounds. Let's go.
But even you could, a lot of that stuff you could do at a higher weight too, though. And that's the thing too. People
she didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Now she's getting back to physical things. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. And so I do a lot in my job is trying to help people get back to that functional stuff. Please. But it's just interesting because we place a lot of cages around ourselves as far as well, because I'm old, I can't do this, or because I've gained weight, I can't do this. And so you try to not take everything away from yourself because you got a little older, because you gained a little weight,
Oh, my favorite is when you see social media is so brutal, when you see people commenting on people's bodies and commenting on people's, oh, you're too old to wear that or do that, or like Beyonce concert, right? People are showing their experience, right? They're having a good time. And here you come, Debbie Downer. Aren't you a little old?
Right. That's called people being haters because they can't afford to go. I don't know.
With their nice Renaissance outfit. Okay. I mean, one of my clients, she took her daughter to London to see her performance and they had a blast. And they had these matching outfits and everything. They had a good time, honey. And she took her baby out of school. Y'all just mad because y'all stuck in that raggedy school while she's out here having a good time.
Right. No, I feel like that could sometimes be maybe a little symptom of capitalism too. Like I said, like, you know, you go to work, you make your money, you try to spend it on what you spend it on. But people just have a lot of jealousy and hatred of people just trying to live their lives. And it's just like, you figure out what makes you happy. Like Tabitha Brown is one of my favorites. She said, have a great day. If you can have a great day, don't go messing up nobody else's day.
We grew up thinking one thing that we did learn from our elders that's still true. If you don't have anything nice to say, why are you even, leaving people alone?
Right. Especially if you don't know.
I do think it's a defense mechanism though. Let's be fair. Let's defend the folks who are in the struggle, right? I find that there's some beautiful people in the world who are literally in the struggle. And so they can't really see. So their cynicism shows up. It's a defense mechanism. It's a protection, right? They have desires that are unmet. And so they come out into the world frustrated. They come in angry. They come with their bad attitude. And maybe they're really not that kind of person, but they've become that way because of disappointments in life and things of that nature. Right. So I try to bring my compassion with me. Remember that they're probably struggling.
Right.
And so,
no, for sure. Yeah. I agree. But I wish that more people would recognize that. Themselves and like try, because they say like, they say hurt people. They do. But my brand is just kind of like, well, how can we help you stop hurting? Like
that's it. Why?
You can't just use that for years and that sort of thing. And like I said, because you have compassion for people when it's early on. But when it happens for years and years and years, and that becomes who you are, when you become just a bitter Betty kind of thing,
let's make sure we say one thing before we leave. If it does not serve you anymore, if their personalities, we have family members, holidays come all the time. There are some people who you have to make some decisions on whether or not they fit into your world anymore. Right. You do not have to host a thing. You don't have to go to everything. You don't have to, you see what I'm saying? Because sometimes we have to have protection of ourselves. No one's protecting you but you. And so showing up angry, frustrated, and all those things is very different than saying, no, I'm not going to go, or no, I'm not going to host.
Right.
Let's be a little more honest with where we are with things. If you're not really in the right space to do it, don't.
Right. And the same goes with social media. Like if you're in a space where you're seeing people at Beyonce concert and it makes you upset, and maybe not be on social media, maybe block that hashtag.
Take some time. Take a social. There's never a reason not to take a break from pretty much anything. That I don't watch the news like that. If it's important, they usually tell me. There's an alert that pops up. Right. There's a tornado warning. My alarm in my house does that, So taking a social media break or taking even just some time, a staycation can do wonders for your brain if you're not overbooked. Stop booking yourself. Take a break.
No, and that's one of the biggest things I've talked about in my brand too. Is like, I have always had a lot of coping skills that have been in movement. Like I've always been a very active person and like to do a million things. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned in a lot of, reflection and that sort of thing, in this new journey of coping is like, it's very helpful to do restful coping. Restful coping is just as important as the movement coping. And so you have to find some balance with it because like, my husband is right now trying to figure out his life. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that he got from our boss was take some time off, take vacation, take time off and just really think, because that's the problem. Like people just be moving through the world, like I said, like robots. And it's like, you gotta unplug. And just really take a break and really make some space for you to think and find that passion, that spark again.
Yeah, if you're not able to do it, I think getting away is always smart, even if it's away from the house. We all have some green space or some, a lake, near the park. Sometimes we need to literally physically move away from the familiar to kind of make room mentally, spiritually, emotionally. To then say, now, what was I doing?
Exactly. Like a reset. People talk about all types of reset, but a lot of times you really do need to kind of reset your brain and your mood and just kind of like your path. Like where was I going again? Because we just, like I said, you get in that routine and that sort of thing. But a lot of times when you take some space and reset, when you come back, you try to focus on what's the most important thing for you, right?
Restorative rest, restorative time that's dedicated would help most people. I think back in the day, we had a better handle on that. Like the way most of us were raised, Sunday was like this time to, spend time with the family, eat a good meal. Sometimes that meal we would not agree with now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah. But still balance, right? All week
right.
long, you're doing all this stuff. And now you have time to, get in the kitchen and spend some time and relax and, oh no, put those laundry, items down. I think we could even get back to just protecting at least half a day on the weekend.
For sure. No, I try to take one day off every weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. I try not to work at all. And then the half of the next day. So I try to only do work on the weekends for about 6 hours out of the whole weekend. So out of that 48 hours, I'm gonna sleep a lot. And I'm gonna play a lot. And I'm gonna work a little bit because that's just the nature of our job. But
yes.
I think that people do need to figure out what works for them to create space for themselves. People just they're not intentional. That's one of the first things we said when we started this, right? People are not intentional about all types of stuff. But if people were more intentional about the relationships they have, who's in their life, how much space they create to think, how much space they create for experiences, like I think that a lot of people would be much happier.
Everything doesn't have to have an answer. You just have to make a blank slate to then fill in the right things. You don't have to know how it's going to end. Like you said about trying new things. It's nice to just try out an idea like swimming. Turns out to be a wonderful thing for you. And it's great to do all your life. I have clients who were terrified as well, and they took lessons and now they have children. They're so glad that they learned how to swim because they didn't know that they would end up being parents. And now they can teach a life skill to someone else. So making space, don't overthink it. Try it. If you don't like it, like don't buy the 10 session package. Try like the 2 sessions.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't overcommit.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, tell us a little bit more about, the program you have online and where people can find you.
You can always find me on all platforms, DrToni MD, Dr. Toni MD. That's Facebook and IG mainly. If you would like to learn more about the brand and what we do, drtonimd.com. But frankly, if you just want to sit down with that notebook over there under that tree, like we talked about, and start making a real strategy for yourself that's unique to you. The workshop that I have for most people is burnoutmakeover.com. Most people are coming to me burned out and don't even know it. So if you're feeling kind of at your wit's end, if you're feeling like everybody comes to you, but there's not enough energy and space and time for yourself, if you're kind of fed up with the career you've created, it's the prison like you talked about, if you're not sure what that looks like, and if you're just starting to realize that the toll that your life has taken, some people are coming with physical symptoms. Right. Oh, my stomach hurts, my hair is falling out, I have headaches, my sleep is poor. Sometimes it's physical symptoms, manifestations of all the things. Sit down for a minute and do the workshop, because I think you'll start to get real clear. Use it. There's lots of examples of the other people who came, and frankly, it helped them to get real clear about where they could start. Getting started is the most important thing. And once you have momentum, it's easier. Right. Burnoutmakeover.com. Get started. Do something for yourself this week and stop putting it off.
Right. For sure. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Dr. Toni. And I just want to say, you've been really important for me, because when I met with you, I was kind of like, I think it was after that whole thing happened where I lost part of my job and I was trying to figure out kind of where my next move was. And so you kind of helped me. Like, I feel like I was probably one of your easier clients because I have a pretty good mindset, I feel like, in general. But my biggest issue was more that I was kind of like trying to do 2 opposing things. And so, I remember one of the things you told me was just like, well, you're going to have to figure that out because those things are not really compatible.
Right. You can be a lot of things, but if we could put it on in your case, right. Call being a poignant part of the decision was
Right.
you can be all of these things, but maybe not at the same exact time.
Exactly.
Which one do you want to do first?
Exactly. So yeah, so that really has helped me figure out, like a timeline for at some point transition in my career, So it's really important for people to think about it because that's one of the biggest things I think now for in family medicine is I have a lot of people who are like in their 50s and 60s and they're doing very physically heavy jobs. And I'm like, we really need to normalize a career change at like 50 years old because at 50 years old, you're a very different person than you were at 20, and physically too,
No, for real. I used to work in Detroit, and those jobs, they would start when they were 16 years old, and they would be retired at 50. Those days are kind of over.
Right. But we need to kind of bring them back because we need to, at around that time, for a lot of people start transitioning to different things, just based on your interests, So I really love all the work that you do, and you really helped me a lot with really thinking about that kind of like long game of what's going to make me happy now and where is this all going? Because that's what helps you kind of feel invigorated to even go through like that robot phase of I have to do these robot things, is if you can have hope that at some point you're going to transition to something else that could be more aligned with who you are now. So,
and enjoying life along the way. Sometimes your career is taking up too much space in your time and your schedule and in your head. And so we talked a little bit about what else you wanted to do with your time. And you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to I'm going to take some of this time that I'm not at work, not by my own choice, to do things that I've put on the shelf. And suddenly you are back to doing a lot of things that help not only you, but other people, your mentorship, sitting on some committees and boards and helping other people get it together. That's some of the most powerful work you've done in years,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you so much. And I'm excited to see how everything continues to play out for you and this journey with this baby. It's going to be an experiment for you.
I'm keeping her alive so far. She's great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I really hope that people take that holistic approach and do something from each of your segments, because if you don't do them all, something's going to suffer.
Exactly. Yep. The whole key to wellness is trying to have that balance between all of it. You can't just sleep all day. You have to do a lot of things, in the meantime. So it's just trying to create a purpose in a life that has meaning for yourself,
Yeah. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Wellness Wednesday. Eat well, think well, move well, sleep well. Wellness Wednesday.